Terah. The angel came to him in it and asked him to read. The prophet replied, "I do not know how to read." The angel caught me forcefully and pressed me so hard that I could not bear it anymore. He then released me and asked me to read. And I replied, "I do not know how to read." Whereupon he caught me again and pressed me a second time until I could not bear it anymore. Then he released me and asked me again to read. But again I replied, "I do not know how to read." Or, "What shall I read?" Thereupon he caught me for the third time and pressed me and then released me and said, "Read, in the name of your Lord, who has created all that exists. He has created man from a clot. Read, and your Lord is most generous, up to that which he knew not." Then Muhammad returned with the inspiration, his neck muscles twitching with terror, till he entered upon Khadijah and said, "Cover me, cover me." They covered him till his fear was over. And then he said, "O Khadijah, what is wrong with me?" Then he told her everything that had happened and said, "I fear that something may happen to me." Khadijah said, "Never, but have the glad tidings, for by Allah, Allah will never disgrace you, as you keep good relations with your kin and kith. Speak the truth, help the poor and the destitute, serve your guests generously, and assist the deserving, calamity-afflicted ones." Khadijah then accompanied him to her cousin Waraqah bin Nawfal bin Asad bin Abdul Uzza, long name, who during the pre-Islamic period became a Christian and used to write the writing with Hebrew letters. He would write from the gospel in Hebrew as much as Allah wished him to write. He was an old man and had lost his weight. Khadijah said to Waraqah, "Listen to the story of your nephew, O my cousin." Waraqah said, "O my nephew, what have you seen?" Allah's apostle described whatever he had seen. Waraqah said, "This is the same one who keeps the secrets, Angel Gabriel, whom Allah has sent to Moses. I wish I were young and could live up to the time where your people would turn you out." Muhammad asked, "Will they drive me out?" Waraqah replied in the affirmative and said, "Anyone, man, who came with something similar to what you have brought was treated with hostility. And if I should remain alive till the day when you will be turned out, then I will support you strongly." But after a few days, Waraqah died, and the divine inspiration was also paused for a while. And the prophet became so sad, as we have heard, that he intended several times to throw himself from the tops of high mountains. And every time he went up to the top of a mountain in order to throw himself down, Gabriel would appear before him and say, "O Muhammad, you are indeed Allah's apostle in truth." Whereupon his heart will become quiet and he will calm down and will return home. And whenever the period of the calming of the inspiration used to become long, he would do as before. But when he used to reach the top of a mountain, Gabriel would appear before him and say to him what he had said before. There are a number of slight variations to this story, related by different people, describing Muhammad's visitation by a spirit, identifying himself as the angel Gabriel. These stories do not always agree with each other in perfect details, but on the whole, a complete picture can be drawn of Muhammad's initial experience with the spirit and his reactions after. And that's what I just presented. From this encounter, Muslims believe that Allah, through the Archangel Gabriel, gave the collection of revelations to Muhammad that are now preferred as the Islamic scriptures.
I'm glad you're here. Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. We're going to be talking about something that has to do with this little video. That's why I played this video today. It has to do with this little ending part here. We'll talk about it, but it has to do with something that I believe is one of the wisest Christian apologetics there is. Apologetics, right? Apologetics is just basically reasoning, right? It's reasoning arguments or written justification of something, typically of a theory or of religious doctrine, right? Apologetics. So Christian apologetics is basically apologetics in the sense of basically defending the faith using historical documents, right? So that's basically what we're doing. Not just doing it with historical documents, but having an understanding of those documents and different things like that. Let me go back over here. Now let's talk about what I want to talk about today. I'll be reviewing one of the a titan, or I would say one of the best interpretators or understanders. What did I say? Understanders. Christian I get that word twisted. A Christian examiner who examines history and examines many different things. Now, the only thing I find that he gets wrong is that he doesn't believe the Bible has a rule in it that says 6,000 years. So we're going to be breaking down this video, as I already did a video debunking his first video, all 10 steps of it. I'll talk about that too as we get there. But I'm going to be talking about basically, does the biblical narrative point that the earth is only 6,000 years? That's what we're going to be playing today and talk about that.
Many people today think that the belief that the earth is 6,000 years old is an essential belief of Christianity, that the Bible teaches that the earth is young, and some Christians only started to reinterpret Genesis after modern scientific advances demonstrated that the earth was billions of years old. But you might be surprised to find out that this is a caricature of the truth. Several Christians in the past didn't believe the earth was necessarily young, and some that did still interpreted Genesis figuratively or allegorically. In fact, the modern young earth movement is relatively new and has a peculiar origin many people are not aware of.
So, like I said, I like Inspiring Philosophy. I think he's very wise. I just don't think he knows prophecy that well. So we're going to see if this is actually a new origin or an older origin. So let's see.
The National Center for Science Education defines young earth creationism as the idea which requires that the earth be no more than 10,000 years old, and that the 6 days of creation described in Genesis each lasted for 24 hours. This is what we see with modern young earth creationist organizations. Answers in Genesis states on their website that creation took place in 4004 BC. Creation Ministries International and the Institute for Creation Research also have articles on their websites stating that the earth is roughly 6,000 years old. I have encountered some young earth creationists.
First, before he ended up leaving that's actually very important what he just put there. Let me actually open up something here. Now, I've been studying genetics for a while, and anyone who's been studying genetics and actually talking with the geneticists and different things like that, they're going to come to a very important conclusion. That everyone today, every single person today, this is a genetic fact, every single person today comes from one father and one mother. Now, doesn't that sound strangely familiar? Doesn't that sound strangely familiar that we all come from one father and one mother? What do you think that would mean if we all come from one father and one mother? Let me show you something real fast. What's very important.
Which is going to be
so there's a lot of different geneticists. I'm gonna talk about them, but there's a lot of different geneticists that agree that basically the biblical narrative is truth. Let me show you something. You know, when you're considering answers in Genesis, just throwing them under the bus it's just a sign that we need to look a little closer at things. Answers in Genesis is a group of scientists that believe in the biblical narrative, proving things a little different than apologetics, proven it by a scientific method. For example, this individual, Dr. Nathan Jensen, is a geneticist. Probably will go into his bio right here a little bit, right? He has a PhD in cell and development of obviously biology from Harvard University. He goes into a lot of different things. He has a video where he goes into the depth of who people are, right? You've probably seen it before. If you haven't, definitely want to see that, right? In Answers in Genesis, we got a playlist, Synthetic Sunday will point that place out, right? But all you have to do is look up Dr. Nathan Jensen and Answers to Genesis on YouTube. It'll come up very simple. But let me show you something real fast what he talks about. So he actually has this very interesting method, and he actually found out that pretty much everyone today is obviously from Adam and Eve, but it also comes to the fact based upon the mutation rate, right? Based upon the mutation rate, that connection of everyone only linked 6,000 years ago. For example, there is an understanding of how haplogroups are basically divided, right? I'm just going to make the story short. Let me just open a note here. I'm going to open up a note real fast just about this because this is a topic. I'm not going to get too deep into this topic because we're going to start talking about the sayings of the first saints and what they were saying and everything. But I want to show you something concerning genetics because I think it's actually quite interesting. That's why I was studying onto it that, of course, Yah puts the life in the blood, but I think it's quite interesting what geneticists say when it comes to the lines of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Ham, Shem, and Japheth, obviously, based on the biblical narrative, if anyone believes the Bible, they have to believe that there was a genetic Ham, Shem, and Japheth. If we already believe that, we have to see if we can find that in genetics. That's what a lot of geneticists have actually been doing, is trying to find that exact split. There's an understanding called monophylactic. Monophylactic groups are actually going to be groups that connect the root. What is a monophylactic group? I'm going to show you something concerning that. Here's an example of a monophylactic group. A monophylactic group considers everything under F-M89. For example, a monophylactic group counts every group underneath it, but excludes other groups. That's how you will know if it's monophylactic, right? So basically, here was a question, right? It says, yes, then is it correct to say F-M89 is the grandfather of IJK, even including GHIJK, but not A and B, nor D and E haplogroups? And Roberto, I talked to different geneticists. This one said yes. Now, what is that? Why is that important? Why is that understanding actually important? What was the reason why I'm pointing to that? Because monophylactic groups are groups that count the root of individuals. For example, let me just go back here. So, like I said, we have a lot of videos on the genetics and stuff, which is right here on Synthetic Sunday. I'm just going to go to something real fast on here for a little definition of something. So we go very deep. I'm not going to go into it today, but I just want to give a understanding of what a monophylactic group is. As I put a definition here, I think it's important to note. Let me make sure I grab it real fast. I just want to show you something. Let me make sure I get that direct piece. And there's always a lot of different information on these things when you go into it, whatnot. Let me see, because sometimes I put it on these things. Okay, so let me show you. Basically, this is what a monophylactic group is. I'm just gonna copy this so that I can put this over here and basically show you off of nature. Let me actually right here. Let me just remove this first part and just type this down. Okay, so let me show you what a monophylactic group is. So a monophylactic group, this is why it's important, because basically it proves the existence of Ham, Shem, and Japheth. It's very important, right? It's going to be basically counting the node. Now, a node is going to be basically where you see your roots here, right? Or a clade. Understanding a monophylactic group is called a clade. Another thing to call that is a clade. Basically, this is what it is. A monophylactic group, sometimes called a clade, right? Just talks about, it includes, here's the most important thing, all its descendants. That's very important. So that means if you see a group and you have descendants from it, you got to know where do we see those descendants and whatnot. But here's a long story short, just to make it more clear. Here, I'm going to go to a picture here. Right over. Matter of fact, I'm gonna open up something here. I'm gonna open up one more piece real fast because I need a unrooted chart to explain this to you. What I mean here. What is an unrooted chart? There's different charts that geneticists see. That's your circular mode chart. There's your unrooted chart. And today I'm not getting on genetics, but I'm just going to be showing you something, for example, just to express what I mean here. That in the biblical narrative and in reality, there is evidence of what is called basically a biblical split. Basically, there's evidence in genetics for Ham, Shem, and Japheth. I'm going to show you why I'm showing you this for the reason. The reason is because if you look on certain places, they'll tell you that these certain groups are ages like 50,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, things like that. And that's the problem when it comes to using science to try to date how the origin of things. Now we can date it back to a certain extent, but to even imagine that we're going to get a pinpoint on roots of things is just hysterical, because we are so late in time. Just to imagine that everything just stayed exactly in the same condition is ludicrous, right? Even in the sense of understanding, right? How long is time, right? How long is time itself, right? It depends. Let's say if you're on Earth, obviously time is the same. But if you're on Jupiter, time is different. If you're on this planet, time is different. So obviously we're standing on Earth using the concepts of Earth to measure the universe. Think about that. But anyways, let's understand this. Watch what you see here. This is actually what you see a 3 genetic split. This is called an unrooted chart. An unrooted chart shows basically what comes from where. Here's a long story short. We know that A and B groups, they actually are going to be one group that stems from BT. There's another group that stems, and that group is going to be C and F groups and D and E groups. Now, the reason why I say that, because if you see under family tree DNA, you'll see that there's a group called CT. CT group would make your DE groups and your CF groups. These are different groups. C and F are one group, and D and E are one group. The other group is A and B. This is actually your evidence of Ham, Shem, and Japheth, what you're seeing here. Long story short, we go into it in much detail. I'm not going to go into it today. But with that understood, if those are the first people, and they say supposedly some of those people are 50,000 years ago, and every single person today, this is what's really important. The Neanderthals and all other people are wiped out. Every single person today stems from these 3 groups. Every single person. When I say every single person, there's a find that they found at the dirt cave of people that were at the dirt cave. Here's an example of that. Every single person who was at the dirt cave will be considered pre-flood people. Neanderthals, Denisovans, things like that. They're ancient genetic people who don't exist today. None of them. Not one of them exists today. You can find, like, when they talk about a partial of Neanderthal DNA, that's important to understand. How can you get a mix, right? That's through your mother. A male gets a mix through his mother. Through Y chromosome, a male can never mix. When you talk mixing, that's just because autosomal, but even in the sense of foundation, a woman always mixes with a man, and a man always mixes with a woman, and a Y chromosome stays the same forever, and a female's X chromosome stays the same forever. The thing that alterates, the thing that changes is the male's extra X chromosome, right? His X chromosome from his mother, or the female's X chromosome, her extra X chromosome from her father, right? And that's where you'll get your autosomal mix. But no one today is going to be your individuals who are considered Neanderthals or Denisovans, things like that. All modern people come from BT and CT. That's where it splits. If you never heard of it, I'm just going to leave it like this. If you never heard of it, it's called reconstruction, or you could just put out of Africa by not having enough proof. Because now what's going on with the genetic world, they find out that basically the out of Africa concept is not having enough proof. So that's going to be something that's very important to know about, that people didn't start in Africa. The biblical narrative says we started in the Euphrates. So that's a world foundation that needs to change in understanding, which many geneticists and many others actually are coming to the understanding of these things. But let's keep on going. This is just something important to know, that based upon genetics, the mutation rate, others know about this. What he was showing there was other geneticists that actually work on genetics actually know that the mutation rate is actually only 6,000 years. So obviously Ham, Shem, and Japheth, the split, if you actually look at that and the way it goes all the way back, is going to go back to basically CT. The way that it actually goes is that it fits the biblical narrative, just to make it plain and simple for the understanding of what that is. We'll get into some more deeper stuff, but let's keep on going because it's going to be talking about some of the biblical things, the things to know about. So it's going to get deep. So apologetics, we get into that.
Who state the world is a bit older, based on a literal reading of the Greek Septuagint. But they still tend to fall into the definition of stating that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old, and most seem to state that it's roughly 6,000 years old. And the common belief among many non-Christians today is that this is how Christians read the Bible until modern science demonstrated that the Earth was 4.6 billion years old. Answers in Genesis also helps by pushing this myth. On their website, Dr. James R. Mook writes, "What did the early church believe about creation? In its first 16 centuries, the church held to a young Earth. Earth was several thousand years old, was created quickly in 6 24-hour days, and was later submerged under a worldwide flood." Mook goes on to contradict himself by listing Christians from the past that did not hold to this interpretation.
So that's what we're going to see today. Did he contradict himself, or we're going to actually know inspiring philosophy's interpretation of certain writings from the saints? We're going to get a perfect interpretation of it.
And additionally, when we dive into the history, we can see there were more Christians than even he acknowledges. Many Christians, long before the advent of modern geology and biology, didn't read the days of Genesis literally, and some allowed for the Earth to be older than 10,000 years old. In the 2nd century AD, St. Irenaeus of Lyons wrote a book responding to Gnostic heretics.
All right, I'm going to let it play. This is what we want to see, right? We was just talking about this person. This is very important. We was talking about it before, right? We was talking about these individuals, right? Irenaeus, or how you say that, right? Let it play, and we're going to continue on to see what he says about his writings.
The various Gnostic sects believe the God of the Old Testament is a different God from Jesus. It was not actually the ultimate creator of all things. Often they would argue that God was evil and lied to Adam and Eve, because the Gnostics read Genesis 2 to mean that God told Adam that if they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, that Adam would die the same day he ate of it, thus interpreting the word for day to mean a literal 24-hour day. But in Genesis 3, it is clear Adam and Eve did not die on the same day that they ate from the tree. St. Irenaeus responded.
So just to get a clear, obviously he's talking about what the Gnostics were saying. They were saying basically, this is what the Gnostics were saying. They were saying God was a liar because he said Adam was going to die on day 1. Obviously, Irenaeus came with a great rebuttal. He's going to actually show a piece of his rebuttal, but he misinterprets this part of his rebuttal. His rebuttal obviously lets them know that death is a condition. Death is a condition that they was going to enter into. That's very important. And from that day, they died. They didn't have the way of life. Their body was on the process of death, right? They were sold to death. But let's keep on going with this. What's going on right here?
By stating that the days in Genesis were not literal 24-hour days, by drawing from 2 Peter 3:8, where it says a day is 1,000 years to the Lord. Since Adam did not live more than 1,000 years, God did not lie when he said Adam would die on the same day that he ate. However, St. Irenaeus also...
Did you get that point that Irenaeus just made? That was super intelligent and super powerful, what he just said. What he basically said, this is actually a very interesting sermon. If you ever see someone do a sermon on this, it's very deep. Not one person lived the day. Not one person lived the day. Based on the concept of not just Peter, but there's other places in Psalms we're going to talk about that says the exact same thing, right? A day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years as a day, right? It's saying basically no one lived 1,000 years. Nobody in the biblical narrative lived 1,000 years, right? So it's basically saying no one lived the day. No one actually lived the day, considered on that method. But also in the sense of understanding, the deeper sense is that death is a condition that they fall through. So just for the sake of understanding. But let's proceed. I just want to enlighten that.
Lord. Since Adam did not live more than 1,000 years, God did not lie when he said Adam would die on the same day that he ate. However, St. Irenaeus also states he thought the days of Genesis 1 were also 1,000-year periods. For in as many...
All right, so here's where he goes wrong. Let's Let's first read the interpretation, and then I'm going to show you what he's saying here. Watch what he says here. For in as many days as the world was made, right? As many days it was made, 6 days, in so many thousand. Now he's saying, see that comma? He's saying something else. In so many thousand years shall it be concluded. Now, what does he mean concluded? Right? Even the word conclude, right? To conclude something means a ending, right? To conclude, to come to a conclusion, right? To come to an ending, right? He's saying in also thousands of years it shall be finished, concluded. So he's talking about a ending, and he's talking about the beginning effects. We're going to go about this very carefully, right? Let's make sure we go about it very carefully. And for this reason, the scripture says, thus, the heaven and the earth were finished. When were they finished? As it says, for in as many days as the world was made, right? That's very important. Then he says it as finished. Now watch what he's connecting here. Watch what he's connecting here. It's a prophecy. All their, let's watch what it says, adornments, right? And God, obviously, it's talking about the stars and everything, all the things in the whole universe and whatnot. And God brought to a conclusion upon the 6th day the works that he had made, right? Finished everything on the 6th day. And God rested upon the 7th day from all his works. So that's the simple biblical story. We already went into this when we talked about even the Jews of that time understanding it exactly like that. It says this is an account of the things. I don't know why I said ancient. This is an account of the things formerly created. Now, you heard what he just said. He said in 6 days they were made and 7th day was finished. He said this is an account of things formally created. Remember that word, formally created. Now watch what he says. He's going to say something else. Note that also. As also, here we go. It is a, watch what it says here, prophecy of what is to come. What does he mean a prophecy of what is to come? What does he mean a prophecy of what is to come? For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years. Anyone who knows me, anyone knows the prophecies that we do here, you know where I'm going. And in 6 days, created things were completed, right? Now, watch what he says here. It is evident, therefore, that, watch what it says here, that they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. Now, what does he just say there? Let's just read that last part at the bottom one more time. He just made a conclusion of a prophecy of what is to come, which concerning the day of the Lord, 1,000 years is as a day, right? Which is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end, a conclusion, an end, right? That's very important, as it was finished at the 6,000th year. At the 6,000th year. What's he talking about there? What is he actually talking about there? He's talking about the Jubilee prophecy. What is the Jubilee prophecy? I'm gonna put a description in the video when I put this little all the sources. I'm gonna put the sources and whatnot. But let me show you what a Jubilee prophecy is. What is the Jubilee prophecy? It's well known, right? If you know about the Sabbath, right? When's the Sabbath? The Sabbath of, now there's a couple different things I'm gonna talk about real fast. I'm just gonna shotgun through it. Obviously, you know about the Sabbath. The Sabbath, the biblical Sabbath, was every 7 days, right? They were rest. That's called the Sabbath for man, right? That's called the Sabbath for man. There's another Sabbath that's talked about, right? There's another Sabbath that's talked about. It's called the Sabbath of the Lord. This one, the 7th day, is the Sabbath of men, right? Every time. But there's another Sabbath called the Sabbath of Yahweh, the Sabbath of the Lord, Sabbath of the Most High, right? The Sabbath of Sabbath, or what you call it, right? 6 years. It'll be every 7th year, right? 6 years they'll do a thing and then they'll rest on the 7th. Every 7th year, right? Very important, right? There's a sign they would do that every year, right? They would do that every 7 years, right? There's also another thing every 7. This is where you got to understand when I say this. Let me make sure I say it as clear as I could. There's a thing called the Jubilee. The Jubilee is basically, this is what the Jubilee is 7 years times 7. Now, it doesn't just stop there, because that's 49 years. The Jubilee by detail lets us know on the 49th year, they'll blow the trumpet. On the 50th year, right? This is very important. On the 50th year was the Jubilee. the 50th year. So a jubilee will be every 50 years, right? A jubilee will be every 50 years to get an understanding of the jubilee, right? That was one of those things that came by. They released every single person. That's very important. They will release every single person who was under the jubilee. Now, there's a greater prophecy when it comes to these things, and that's what he's actually talking about here. We also can connect it with the Hosea 6 prophecy, right, where he says, right, he says, in 2 days he shall revive us, and in the third day we shall rise to the sight. We already go over that, right? The third day is 1,000-year reign. The 2 days are 2,000 years. From Messiah, 2,000 years, right? He's talking about a 2,000-year thing to happen in the time to come. Also, that aligns perfectly with 6,000 years, but we're moving a little fast. Let's understand what we're saying here. We're going to get right to it. Let's get back over here. So basically, let me show you something here. Remember, a jubilee is 50 years. Remember, the Hosea prophecy said in 2 days he will revive us. 2 days is 2,000 years. 40 jubilees goes in 2,000 years. 40 jubilees goes in 2,000 years, right? Now, what's important about that, if we go 40 jubilees back, we go up to Abraham. If we go another 40 jubilees back, that's to Adam, right? So based upon, and we already went over the details of the biblical narrative, and that's why I broke down, be careful of people that try to say that they root with cuneiform. The Hebrews wrote with Semitic language, right? Linguistics is important to note. The Hebrews did not write in cuneiform. They root in a Shemitic language, right? That's going to be your, obviously, Proto-Hebrew and things like that, right? Pictographic, things like that, of that sort. What's important, though, 40 jubilees is 2,000 years. If we count from the time of Adam till the time of our time, we would have 6,000 years to this day, right? To this day right here. And guess what? That's why on this page, we got prophecy that talks about that we are approaching the 6,000th year, and we ourselves actually know there's not one, there's not two, but there's 3 prophecies in the biblical narrative that agree and point to the exact same year. And we can go over that and talk about that, but we already did in different notes. We'll talk about that in different pieces throughout the time. But this is actually very important to know that the biblical narrative, based upon prophecy and the pattern of prophecy, this actually lets us know that that saying that was said there by that individual, right, by Irenaeus, when he says, "For in as not matter of fact, I'm gonna let you see how he interpretates it, and then I'm gonna give you the right interpretation."
Many days as this world was made, in so many thousand years shall it be concluded. And for this reason the Scripture says, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all their adornment. And God brought to a conclusion upon the 6th day the works that he had made, and God rested upon the 7th day from all his works. This is an account of the things formerly created, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed. It is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. Irenaeus thought that each day of creation was 1,000 years, meaning on his view.
Where did he go wrong? He said that Irenaeus said that each day represents 1,000 years. He's not talking about the Genesis days. He's saying a prophecy. Irenaeus is saying that a prophecy, that's what the word there, right there, prophecy, right? A prophecy is basically looking forward into the future, right? Prophets, before they were called prophets, they were called seers, right? You can see that in the biblical narrative. It say before a prophet was called a prophet, they were called seers. They would see into the future, things to come. So he's saying, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come, right? What is to come, right? He's not talking about something that came to pass anymore. At first, he talks about something that came to pass. He says, for in as many days as the world was made, right? Was made. For as many days as the world was made, in so many thousand years shall it be concluded. So he's saying, and he's showing you that as it was made, is so the prophecy of how it's going to be concluded. It says, and for this reason, the scripture says, right, thus the heavens and the earth were finished, right? 6 days, right? He finished all those things when he made all those things and whatnot. 6 days he worked, right? And he rested on the seventh day and all his work was finished. And then he makes it clear this is an account. This is an account of the things formerly created, right? As also it is watch what it says, as also, that also is what we need to pay attention to. As also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years. And in 6 days created things were completed. It is evident, therefore, right? It is evident, therefore, that they will come to an end. See how we get that understanding there? That they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. So he's saying that everything will come to an end at the 6,000 year. Because how long is Messiah's millennium reign? 1,000 years. That's gonna be 7,000 years completion. So that's what he's concluding, that we know that Messiah has 1,000-year reign. So he's concluding that everything should be finished by the 6,000th year. So he's making it very clear what he understands and believes. We can also see that understanding with other saints when we go into the depth of it. But obviously, understanding prophecy, this is what he's concluding, even on the sense of understanding of how he's speaking it. He makes it very clear in the highlights of this term here to understand that he's concluding that the world is only 6,000 years. One, we have to make sure we understand that, yes, he is talking about the beginning, but this one sentence here, this one last sentence, this last part right here, right? As we know, the semicolon is going to separate these two pieces, and God rested upon the seventh day from all his works. That's important to note, but note this part right here. Note this part. This is all we got to note to understand the full understanding. But we can understand this too. But if you want to get the highlight, this part right here. This is an account. When he's saying about this account, he's saying this is an account of the things formerly created. So that account was the things formerly created. As also including, here comes something else. So just like I say, here's a couple dollars. Also, here's some more. Here's some more of what I'm going to give you. As also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years, right, is as a day. I'm moving a little fast. But for the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed, right? Where does it say a day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, right? It says that in a couple different places. I'm going to show you something real fast. What I'm talking about when we're saying these things, as I think this is very interesting find, because I get a lot of brothers to say that's not a prophecy, but there it is, a first century saint giving it right there, saying it's a prophecy, right? As Hosea 6:2 says, after 2 days he will revive us, and in a third day, 1,000-year reign, we will live in his sight, right? 2 days he will revive us, right? From Messiah's time, right? 2,000 years is going to give us to that 6,000th year, right? It says there, so important. I'm gonna show you some pieces. Obviously, Peter talks about it, right? He says 2 Peter 3:8. But beloved, be not ignorant of this one thing, that one day is with the Lord as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day, right? We see that in the Psalms too. Psalms 90:4. For 1,000 years is in your sight, right? Are in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, right? It also means that he has great patience. That's very important too. And as a watch in the night. Psalms 84:10. For a day in your court is better than 1,000 years, right? Very important. So you get a little understanding of those things. You can see 1,000 years as a day. And then you see this, obviously, first century saint get an understanding on that. So just for clarity, he's not saying that those days are 1,000 years. He's concluding a prophecy that everything will be concluded in 6,000 years. Got to read that carefully.
The Earth would be roughly 12,000 years. Technically speaking, he would not qualify as a young Earth creationist, since he states the age of the Earth was over 10,000 years, but only.
So we already know that's not true. That statement, you can read it yourself, read it carefully, and you can understand just by that last piece, again, one more time, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, and in 6 days created things were completed. So 6 days were were things completed. So he's saying because those 6 days everything was completed, he goes on and says, it is evident thereof that they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. At the 6,000 years, because he's saying that's a prophecy to come, right? As he's saying, it shall come to an end at the 6,000th year. At, saying that at means that 6,000 year hasn't come yet. That's very important. Let's keep going. I hate when I don't like when this thing comes out like that. I'm gonna close this and reopen it. Hold on. All right. I just gotta reopen the screen share. And if any questions, let me know. This is just more of a little thing that, just for clarification on these things. Keep going.
Only in a technical sense. However, the important point to take away from this is St. Irenaeus didn't think one had to interpret the days of Genesis 1 as literal 24-hour days, meaning the chapter was open to interpretation in the 2nd century AD, and doesn't
There is no private interpretation of prophecy.
necessarily have to mean the earth is only 6,000 years old. And St. Irenaeus is not alone in this understanding. St. Justin Martyr also seems to agree on this reading of the days as being 1,000 years.
That's all right, because we know that one day is as 1,000 years and 1,000 years is as a day. That's a very important prophecy to understand. So we also got others that acknowledge that.
Holding to a different interpretation, Clement of Alexandria also did not believe that creation took place in 6 24-hour days. He seemed to...
All right, now let's get deep. Clement of Alexandria. Who is Clement of Alexandria? I'm going to let him completely speak, and he himself knows who's Clement of Alexandria. Clement of Alexandria is a Gnostic. That's who Clement of Alexandria is. Let's keep on going.
to have believed all things were created instantly in the past, and that the days of Genesis 1 are figurative, ordering which creations were the most important to God. The longer the day, the more important whatever was listed on that day. Clement may have gotten this interpretation from a contemporary of Jesus. The Jewish philosopher Philo of Alexandria also advocated for an instantaneous creation, and that the days of Genesis 1 were figurative. This instantaneous interpretation of Genesis was also promoted by other church fathers, like St. Athanasius the Great, Origen, St. Augustine, and others. St. Augustine taught the days of Genesis 1 were not sun-divided days, but God-divided days, and that all 6 days of Genesis 1 are called one day in Genesis 2:4.
So obviously the teachings of, as you've seen the connection right here, Clement of Alexandria, we're going to show you how he's a Gnostic. We already went over it. Had got his teachings, which he tried to say everything was all just figurative and one day and all this, whatnot. He got his ideas from this individual. Who is this? Who is this individual? First, let's go through memory lane real fast to get a little understanding on who's Clement and everything. So we just did a little video where we was talking about Gnostics and everything. Let's talk a little bit more on the Gnostics and what they were doing there. So I'm going to go to a few timestamps here and go through just memory lane. Right? Now let's talk about this, the Hermetic writings. The first time you ever hear of this mixture, this combination, right? The Herma, basically times 3, what you see in there. One of the earliest mentions of the idol was mentioned by Clement of Alexandria. Now you'll say that, oh, that's a Christian, right? Because that's a Christian of Alexandria. You got to know about the different sets. If you don't know about these different sets, you might be taken for a ride. What's very important is this individual, Clement of Alexandria, was not a pure Christian. This individual was actually more of an idol worshiper than anything. Let me actually go to something here. Gonna go down a little bit and talk about some things, right? Just talk about Clement reached Alexandria and stuff, and he had some writings and everything on some things and whatnot. Matter of fact, I might play a little video on it just to show a little something about it and talk about what he was doing and everything. But let's go down. All right, so watch what it says here. He says Clement is supportive of women playing an active role in the leadership of the church. Is that the way that Paul said that women could be in the leadership of the church? Be honest. If you know the writings of Paul, guess what Paul says? He says that a woman is supposed to be silent in the church, but Clement thought differently. And he provides a list of women he considered, but obviously inspirational, which includes both biblical and classical Greek figures. You think that woman was one of them? It has been suggested that Clement's process views on gender as set out in the obviously this what here were influenced by Gnosticism. What is it saying here? It's saying that this individual actually was influenced by Gnostics. What is Gnostics? However, later in the work, he argues against the Gnostic faith. He's trying to say he's not convinced by Gnostics, but you'll see that he had, obviously, like you saw there, some influence by the Gnostics. We're getting deeper. We're going to start learning about the Gnostic faith. Who are the Gnostics? What are the Gnostics? They're different. The Gnostic groups are different groups. You'll see the Christians, the believers, original believers will rebuke them. But let's continue reading with a little this video, right? That's why we went into the Gnosticism. They believe in Christ, but they added on a lot of crazy stuff. You got to know the difference between these groups because these are two different early groups. We'll get a little more detail into it.
Not by all, but certainly by some Christians, including influential leaders. Clement of Alexandria, a Christian theologian and head of the catechetical school in Alexandria, was one. Lactantius, Christian advisor to Constantine the Great, was another. Many Gnostic Christians also embraced it. Reasonable conclusion is that they got it from Plato. Plato was especially popular, repeating. Here's the thing. We have no ancient Egyptian texts from before Plato's time that expressed such ideas. There thus is no evidence that such ideas existed in Egypt. We do have Plato's writings that express those ideas, and we know that Plato was extremely influential.
All right, so I'm going to let this play, and we're going to talk about some information.
In fact, in a period when Plato was especially popular, repeating ideas found in Plato by Greeks who knew Greek philosophy better than any other philosophy, the most reasonable conclusion is that they got it from Plato.
Hermetic philosophy also influenced Christianity through the Alexandrian church fathers, St. Clement and St. Origen, who synthesized pagan and Christian religious doctrines. It is due to such theologians that the Hermetic concept of the Word is found in the opening verse of the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word.
Clement and Origen lived centuries after the Gospel of John was written. But the fact is, the concept of the Logos, the Word, is found in Philo's writings. He was a Jewish Platonic philosopher who lived in the 1st century CE in Alexandria, where the Hermetic writings were produced. Scholars have shown that it was he who influenced Hermetic writing, not the other way around.
Hermes Thoth was known to the ancients as the scribe of the gods and master of the word.
All right, I don't know if you caught that fast. That's why we're doing this. You see how connected this is? You see how connected it is? I'm telling you, Clement of Alexandria wasn't a Christian. Clement of Alexandria got so much teaching from this person, right? This person right here is who he got a lot of teaching from. And his ideas is false. Even he shows that this person puts that Genesis law created in one day. Obviously, understand that Clement's doctrine is wickedness. Understand that his doctrine is extra stuff, right? Just to show a little understanding for what I'm talking about. Let's keep on going with this and keep on getting a little understanding deeper into that, just to get a solid understanding that what I'm showing you is true. Remember that we talked about that, and that causes confusion. Rather, a Gnostic isn't a Christian, they're a Gnostic.
Cyril was ever born. As for the wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus, it was embraced, perhaps not by all, but certainly by some Christians, including influential leaders. Clement of Alexandria, a Christian theologian and head of the catechetical school in Alexandria, was one. Lactantius, Christian advisor to Constantine the Great was another. Many Gnostic Christians also embraced it.
For the West,
All right, let me show you something real fast. I had added something. I had added something to a video the other day ago to this one because I didn't play the whole piece of this to show why. Now, this is very important to understand. I'm just going to read something important. This is important to understand, right? I just put some correction to something because I was saying one of the disciples were crucified December 25th. It was Saturnalia, but I just put some correction to give some understanding that Saturnalia wasn't always December 25th. It came later on by the changing of the winter solstice and all stuff, but whatnot. Just put a little clarity there for that. But it was on Saturnalia. What's important, though, to understand, I'm going to show you something now. As I added something here that I think is important to know about necessarily. It's actually in this description right here. Let me actually show that. I actually have something that I didn't show all of it. Let me make sure I grab that. In fact, I don't think I put it on this note. I think I actually put it on. Let me make sure. Yeah, this is this note. I'm gonna see. It's not on this little one. Let me make sure if I put that there, that whole piece. Apologize for that. In fact, I'll just go to it on a note. I didn't show the full thing of this little thing. So let me just show it right here. This good shepherd thing, let me just show this. This good shepherd thing, you gotta know that this is not the original Christian art. I'm just gonna jump to the part I didn't show. This is something that's very important to know. This little thing, remember, how old was Christ? How old was Christ when he started his ministry? He was 30 years old. So Messiah wasn't a child when he started his ministry. A lot of times when you see this little statue thing, is usually a child. Also remember, herding or pastoralism was natural during that time, right? Though this thing was an idol of, it's like making an idol of a man screwing in a light bulb. And it's like, well, anyone that screws in the light bulb is an idol now because they made someone screwing the light bulb as an idol. That's how natural it was for you see someone who's a pastoralist and their sheep to escape, and they got to pick them up and carry them back. Is basically, and that's why when you see a lot of people, they see Christ, they say good shepherd, they link them to this idea. Now, the idea of this thing is basically in a connection to Gnosticism. That's one thing I didn't show also, but it's also important to note what year this thing was made. It'll tell you right on here. That's why I had to make a. Let me make sure that I got a timestamp there for that clarification on that. I think I do, but I think I didn't add this. I'm glad I'm looking at this now. I don't think I added the video on there, but I wanted to make sure that was clear on there. But I don't think I put that. In fact, it's not even this video. I don't know why I went to this video. It's not in this video. It's on this video. It's on this video. But if you can see here, I'm gonna go down to it. I always put timestamps for clarity. It's very important to note this little piece. I didn't show the whole thing, but it's important to note that piece is late. I just want to read this, just get a little understanding. Obviously, we went through the description and talked about what Messiah looked like, the readings and everything from the papers where we talk about the first century Judeans didn't look like that. But we also went through something that's very important that I had talked about concerning this. Is basically the connection with Gnosticism. Let me just make sure I can just play that right here. So you can see it'll try to connect it. Let me make sure I open this. If you look here, it'll tell you that this right here, this picture, right? Obviously don't have a beard, right? Obviously it's very important. But notice this is late 3rd century BC, right? It's comparable to the idolatry in late 3rd century BC. That's very important. 3rd century. That's not early Christianity. That's late 3rd century, right? So you'll see, obviously, pastoralism, right? That's something that's normal. Like I said, it's like making an idol of being a taxi driver, right? A lot of people are taxi drivers. People are pastoralists, right? Making an idol of pastoralists is one of those things that you'll constantly see people going to be involved with the natural things, right? So that's just something to always keep an understanding of. But note that Messiah was described, first of all, having a beard. And second of all, we already know that this imagery is connected to the 3rd century. And who is connected to, right? You guessed it, Clement. So very important. Obviously, his teaching spread on and got into some of the other teachings. So what you see today is because the calamity of stuff. But remember, looking at the roots, we know the origin, the understanding of what things were and whatnot. That's why we look into these things very closely and carefully. So obviously, Irenaeus, not involved with that. He's an individual that believed the gospel, pretty much. That's what we was talking about early on. His writings, right, is true. Right, his writings is true. But the other individual, he's a Gnostic, right? He's a Gnostic. He's not something that I would recommend quoting or using in the sense of a defense, right? Let me just make sure I don't have nothing else. I think that's all I wanted to show you on that. Well, also the Gnostic. What is Gnosticism? Just going to give you a little quick summary on that real fast. Back 25. Obviously, I don't agree with the imagery, but it's all about the historicity of the story, right?
That word came to had been mentioned in the works of the.
Matter of fact, I don't want to skim through. I don't want to take too much time. But if you want to see this, what is Gnosticism? Obviously, I made a video. I made a playlist and everything. This will be the playlist. But if you click this where it says note, it'll go over where we go over straight over to Gnosticism. I put a little comment there and say, it's basically Gnosticism. But I made a playlist right here. This is basically what the playlist looks like. So absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Very important, right? Au. What does au mean? Even in the sense of understanding, this word actually has a meaning to it in Latin. He'll know. Let's keep on going on. Let's keep on keeping on. So just a little understanding on these things. It gets deep, right? It gets deep. These understandings are important. So obviously Clement of Rome was an idolater. So obviously he got his teachings from an idolater. No Christian, as you've seen that other believer, he believes that the world is only 6,000 years old, as you see right here. One more time on the read where he says, as also it is a prophecy of what is to come. For the day of the Lord is as 1,000 years, right? The day of the Lord, he's talking about a future day of the Lord. The day of the Lord is a day where the Lord makes a judgment, where everyone's brought low and the Lord is only lifted up. So he's talking about a future day when he says the day of the Lord in itself. And in 6 days, created things were completed, right? He lets us know all things were completed in 6 days. Then he continues on, as we know, right? It is evident, therefore, right? What is that therefore? That they will come to an end at the 6,000th year. Come to an end at the 6,000th year. Prophecy. Very important. But let's continue on.
This instantaneous interpretation of Genesis was also promoted by other church fathers, like St. Athanasius the Great, Origen, St. Augustine, and others. St. Augustine taught the days of Genesis 1 church fathers, like St. Athanasius the Great, Origen, St. Augustine, and others.
So even in the sense of using those individuals, I'm just going to close that. Even on the sense of using those individuals, you got to know who is connected to who, right? Like I said, the call of Hermes is obviously essentially a pagan Gnosticism. Obviously, it has also incorrect understandings and doctrines. Anyone who would get involved with the doctrines would end up, you'll see that they would be making all types of mistakes. Clement of Rome was obviously a Gnostic. It lets us know, obviously, he himself, right? His secret works, which exist only in fragments, suggest that he was familiar with pre-Christian Jewish, obviously, Gnosticism and a couple different things, right? It just lets us know in one of his works, he basically argues that Greek philosophy had its origin among non-Greeks, claiming that both Plato and these individuals was taught by Egyptian scholars. So he just talks about some. So what is he having these conversations for? Why is he talking about Plato was taught by these individuals and whatnot? Because very, very important to understand. He goes into the depth of it. We already talked about it, how he was influenced by Gnosticism and the teachings that he had and whatnot. It talks about basically where he came from and different things like that. And it goes into depth into basically, long story short, we already talked about it. right? We already talked about the details. You got to look at those, the writings, the fragments. You see some of those things, and you get an understanding on what's been going on. There's other pieces that connect them and everything. So just to get a little understanding, it has been suggested that obviously that gender role, that whole thing, we already talked about that, was obviously not a teaching from Paul. That was a teaching from his own things. It goes into depth into some of the things that he gets into. But what I want to show you is that who's his disciples, right? Alexandria, right? We already talked about him, right? One of the individuals, and also Origen, right? Was one of his disciples, right? It's very important. So they had got some of the teachings that he had put in there. So that's very important. And others with connections with that.
St. Augustine taught the days of Genesis 1 were not sun-divided days, but God-divided days, and that all 6 days of Genesis 1 are called one day in Genesis 2:4, where it states, "In the day that the Lord God made the heavens and the earth."
So what is he not understanding when he says, in the day that the Lord made the heavens and the earth? What does he mean, in the day that the Lord made the heavens and the earth? It's talking about when he finished it all, right? In the day the Lord made the heavens and the earth. When he finished the heavens and the earth, day 7. So it's talking about in the day the Lord finished the heavens and the earth. So it's talking about day 7 is talking about what's happened, right? All this happened in the rest is what it's basically explaining. Is that Adam's fall, the rest was there. Satan came down and knew what was going on and had to mess it up for everyone else. So he's saying right on that same day when everything was finished, Satan came down and did what he did and tempted them, and all those things happened. So the Lord rested that day. That's why he wasn't there, because he rested that day. He rested that day, as it said, on that day he rested, right? That day he rests. Just like now, as it says, there's a scripture that says, right? In fact, let's read a scripture. You know that's what we're going through right now, right? I'm gonna read you a scripture. All right, so Isaiah, this scripture, in fact, I'll put it in your face so you can see it. It's a very important scripture to know about why you can't see Yah right now. Why you don't see Yah right now. Look what it says in Isaiah 8 and 20 and 17, right? Let me just put KJV. It doesn't matter, but I like this one better. It says, and I will wait upon the Lord, right? That hideth his face from the house of Jacob. I will look for him. You heard what it said there? So why you're not seeing the Lord right now, right? He's waiting. It says he's long suffering. He's waiting, right? But at that time, it says that the Lord rested in that day, right? In that day, he rested. And he said in the day that he completed all his work, which was day 7, as it says, in day 7, he completed all his work. On day 7, Satan knew that it was his moment to come down and tempt man. It's talked about that. In fact, Irenaeus goes into details onto these things and talk about these things. The same individual that you see here, he goes into details and say, yes, basically Satan, when he came down, he didn't think the Lord knew that he heard what he was saying when he was talking to Adam and Eve, right? And it talks about basically the expression of the guilt, as Yah didn't want to put the guilt on Adam, so he basically asked him a question to put the guilt on Eve, and then asked the question to Eve so he can put the guilt on Satan. And he didn't ask Satan a question. This is what Irenaeus says. He didn't ask Satan a question. He knew what he did. He knew that he came down there to fool man. He knew it. He knew that he came down there to fool man so that he himself can take away their salvation. He did it in the time of rest. That's very important. So that's just something important to know when he says, in the day that the Lord made the heavens and the earth. So the day he completed was day 7. Just something to understand there.
Thus the days, according to his reading of Genesis 1 and 2, were not literal 24-hour days. It follows, therefore, that he, who created all things together, simultaneously created these 6 days or 7, or rather the one day 6 or 7 times repeated.
That's obviously Clement of Alexandria's teachings from the idol worshiping that he was doing from the individual we seen. That's obviously not correct. So you can see the influence that he's already receiving. You can note that right from the start, where he says, who created all things simultaneously, right? Created there, right? 6 days. These 6 days or 7, or rather one day, 6 or 7 times repeated, right? That's where you can know it, what he's going on there. That's simultaneously, right? He's basically saying like a one day and 7 times. You can see he's confused. He's conflicted. He's got some other doctrine that's conflicting him. That's very important. So he's getting a very conflicted doctrine because of that and or, right? No private interpretation of prophecy. So we can't say an or. It's either this or this. You're making confusion by doing that. Obviously, that's extra doctrine.
Why, then, was there any need for the 6 distinct days to be set forth in the narrative one after the other? The reason is that those who cannot understand the meaning of the text, he created all things together, cannot arrive at the meaning of Scripture unless the narrative proceeds solely step by step. In other words, St. Augustine believed the days of Genesis 1 were not 6 24-hour days, but part of the narrative structure of Genesis 1. So one didn't have to take Genesis 1 to be explaining how creation literally happened. Now, these early church fathers, who believed in an instantaneous creation and took Genesis 1 figuratively, were still technically young earth creationists.
Obviously, not following the rules of the 7-day creation is important. Now, like I said, we can continue on. He goes on to the Middle Age and talk about those things and whatnot, but just from that little bit right there is debunked. His idea of how it works is debunked. Not just that, we already went over his whole thing to understand. I'm just going to show you a little example of how we had debunked him before. I'm not going to go over the whole video, just going to show a piece.
They use a scientific approach to it. But if you believe that like these particles exist, then how is it possible that you deny that God could just always exist?
Exactly. I think this is his most silliest thing I ever seen. This is the most dumbest. For the sake of understanding, I say the concept is dumb, not the person. I think that he just needs to see the truth. But I think this is the most idiotic design I ever seen. Let's talk about this. First of all, this is the beginning. And actually what he's actually showing here that there's stars already. But Genesis actually reads this, right? How can this be before the biblical week? Because right here he's saying that the week started here. He's saying that there was millions and billions of years and all of a sudden the week came. That's what he's saying there. But watch what it says. How can this be before the biblical week? Right? Because Genesis 1:16 says, and God made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. So therefore, there can't be stars or nothing. There's nothing in the beginning. In the beginning, all there is a space, time, space, and matter. That's all that there is. There's no stars. This is the most silliest design I ever seen, period. How can you put the week after the so-called Big Bang Theory? Because he's trying to put the Big Bang Theory first before the week. But do you know that this is sharply disproven? This is actually sharp. This is scientifically. This is why it's a theory. This is actually. If you've never seen this video goes really deep into the Big Bang Theory and everything. Talks about basically the W map and basically how the Big Bang Theory is debunked, and basically to conclude that a person, right? In fact, let me show you something. I can debunk the idea that there was a time frame when humans wasn't here and animals were only here. Do you know that there was no time frame where there were land animals and there were no human animals? Do you know that there's no time frame? Listen to what I'm saying. This in any exact estimate of millions of years. You see these years where they say, you see this year right here. This is the oldest one on this list. You see this year 500 million years, right? 500 million years, right? This is where they say humans didn't exist in this time. 500 million years. But let me show you something that's very important to understand. That I actually found evidence of humans, fossils of humans, 600 million years ago. That's what this is right here.
Ridiculous tabloid story.
This is an idea of 600 million years old humans. Now, obviously, right? I'm not the type to just take any type of Google search and just say, you know what, that's the answer there. I'm going to look deep into it. So I did look deep into it, to the academia of it. And what I found out is that they did find these different humanoids in New Zealand. What you mean New Zealand? Basically, long ago, Australia used to be a underneath the ice. These individuals were found underneath the ice of Australia. Underneath Australia, apparently, look it up. Australia was a forest, right? Australia used to be a forest. It used to be a forest in Australia. There used to be a major forest there. Just a little bit of that. 600 million years old humans. 600 million years old. Because what was made before for the animals? What was made before the animals? Humans. It gets really deep and says that humans basically didn't have, they couldn't go poop pretty much. It's basically said whatever they consumed, that was what they had in them. They were just full of energy. They were just, and what's interesting, if you know about how humans are, humans can't produce their own vitamins. But apparently these individuals might have been producing their own vitamins. They might have been producing their own vitamins, and they might have been, what's the word I'm looking for? Early humans. But long ago, in the place that I'm talking about, there was a rainforest. There's evidence of an ancient rainforest in Australia. You know that? Or Antarctica. Antarctica, obviously, that's what some people talk about the flat Earth as an ice wall. Well, I don't believe that. I actually believed in the sense of understanding that long ago, Australia used to have grass. It used to be a place where it probably was like maybe even a paradise in a way. It was a place where there was like a paradise there, and you had a lot of things going on in Australia, right? It was a lot of things happening in that time. And this was only 100 million years ago. But I'm showing you that they found people in this desert area, right? In this area where they also found many fossils of dinosaurs and whatnot and everything and what have you. But they also found people there, right? And I can show you evidence of other examples of ancient humans, right? I got humans that are said 500 million years old. You can find it really easy, right? $500 million years old human fossil, right? They talk about it all the time. A footprint, a 500 million year old footprint that baffles scientists. 500 million years old. 500 million. So that means that these individuals were standing with dinosaurs. Humans were standing with dinosaurs. The world is not as old as you think it is. The world is not actually as old as you think it is, right? It's a very interesting paper. You can download it yourself. I'll put this in the description, and if you want to see it, it's very controversial. I'm not going to go deep into it, but it is a very controversial topic. And I have a lot of pieces of information that go into this individual and whatnot and all these things. So obviously, like I said, these things get deep. Like I said, Dr. Nathan Jensen talks about how every human in the world today, we're one. Every single person in the world today, we're one. Millions and billions of years is a fake concept. This doesn't really exist. It's only something that is being presented for the people to try to make it seem like the world is older than it is. But we can find things that humans had that are found in things that are said hundreds of millions of years ago. Hundreds of millions of years ago. Hundreds of millions of years ago. Very important to understand that. So just to get an understanding on that, we don't believe in the millions and billions of years because it is easily debunked. Easily debunked with that family. So, with clarification, is the world 6,000 years based upon a biblical narrative and understanding of it? Absolutely. Like it or not, but Yah's about to come within a short time. Here it is. Here's a prophecy for you. Before the next election, you're going to see the whole world different. With that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.